So I have to tell you that I'll long remember Thanksgiving Day of 2019. On that day, all of the bishops of Pennsylvania had a private meeting with Pope Francis. Now, I got to be really honest with you to tell you, that was part of what is known as the ad limina visit. Technically speaking, every 5 years, every bishop in the world has to meet with the Holy Father to give a state of the diocese, and the United States was really part of that in the last part of 2019 and the beginning of 2020. The word ad limina comes from going to the tombs of both Peter and Paul. And so not only going to the tombs, but it's important that we meet the successor to St. Peter. And I have to tell you that, there was a little bit of complaining on the part of us bishops, like, did we pull the short straw on having to be there, during Thanksgiving time? And, immediately when we came into the room where Pope Francis was, he immediately made us feel at home. I felt kind of like that I was at a reunion with my classmates. And the first thing that he said to all of us, I really want to apologize to you because I've called you away from your families on this Thanksgiving Day. And so I hope that I can be the second best to being with your families. And I felt a little bit guilty, about grousing about having to be there on Thanksgiving Day. But his warmth really made us feel even more comfortable. And during the course of the entire meeting, and we were with him for 3 hours, what really struck me the most about him and seeing him in action in terms of his conversing with us and being open to the questions that we had with him was a characteristic that Jesus expects from us, calls forth in today's gospel. That we be childlike. Everything about his welcome was exactly that. As a child does, the welcome mat was out, the hospitality was there. There was some joking around, lightheartedness. But one of the most important things that Jesus focuses in on in today's gospel, that's a part of what it means to be childlike, is to be dependent upon, to look up to our Father. And everything that the Holy Father reflected about his leadership in the church, and his expression of what Jesus expects of us as bishops in our leadership of the church, is that we've always got to be able to look to the Father. In another passage, we know that Jesus wants to invite people to come to know his Father. He says it in today's gospel, but he gives us a good formula of how to do that when he prayed the Our Father, one of the first prayers that any child really learns. And it seems to me, my sisters and brothers, that we really need to think about what we need to do to become more childlike, not childish, but to be more childlike. And especially in the characteristic that Pope Francis showed so powerfully. To really look up to the Father, to pray to the Father, to be open to the Father, to see what is in fact the Father's will, just as Jesus always, as the Son of the Father, looked to the Father for guidance as well. And I suspect, like myself, all of you have examples of people who've shown you exactly that kind of childlikeness. Pope Francis is one for me. Maybe it's your parents or teacher or somebody else in your own life. But today we also have the opportunity to be ever grateful for the life of a saint who likewise, despite the fact that he was a brilliant scholar, one of the most powerful characteristics in his life was his childlikeness. We know that Bonaventure came into his own in the leadership of the Franciscan community about 30 years after the death of Pope Francis. He wrote a tremendous tome about Francis to help people to understand the Franciscan rule a little bit better. But despite his scholarship, the core of what he was about was to note not only that was he a son of Francis, but most important of all, he was a son of the Father. And he certainly influenced the Franciscan communities of that day and since in helping to understand precisely that. Maybe that's one of the reasons why Pope Francis, a Jesuit, chose the name of Francis, because he likewise wanted to model Francis, Bonaventure, in their goal to recognize the need for them to be childlike and to be dependent upon the Father. And so today, as you and I go about doing what we are called to do, may we not, in the true American spirit, seek to do it all by ourselves. But most important of all, at this moment, when we come to that altar, and whatever it is that we do in the course of the day, let's do what Jesus asks us to do, to look up to the Father. And when we seek and demonstrate that kind of dependence, then what the Lord also asks of us is going to naturally happen. We will, in fact, become more childlike.